Hey, you guys, thanks for coming out tonight. Thank you for registering for our virtual webinar on your immune system and immunity and kick the sick. That's just what we really need to do this winter. I know so many of us are just petrified when the temperature cools off and we start moving our bodies, the sunshine's not out. We've been inside, we're kind of eating a crappy diet, especially with Halloween approaching and Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year's. And you're like, oh my gosh, since February and nobody really likes February because it's cold and boring. So pretty soon our immune systems start to drop and our health starts to drop. And really those viruses, those colds, those little bacteria and every other thing that's out lingering has been there the whole season. They don't hibernate for the summer and come out in the winter to attack us. They've been there, but they're opportunistic. That means our bodies have given them an opportunity to take over, that they've been bombarded with other stress, that they can't take care of the stress of this virus. So I want you on this webinar to be able to learn how the immune system works, get empowered. Let's bust some of those germ myths. Let's bust the cold and flu myths, and let's really learn how to boost your immune system naturally and let it do its job, because there is a balance in your immune system. It works two different ways, just like your nervous system works in two different ways, where we talk about the sympathetic nervous system, which is the fight or flight response, and the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the heal, repair, rest, and digest response. Well, guess where the immune system lies? In that parasympathetic nervous system, of course, but your immune system has two different modes of operation. It's got Th1 and Th2, which you're going to learn about, because there's an internalizer and an externalizer, and you don't want too much of either. You want a nice balance, but you're also going to learn why your kids might have an imbalanced immune system, and they might be the kid that's constantly sick and a runny nose and just never stops. They've got a cold all winter long, or you've got the kid with chronic autoimmune eczema, constipation, where they just can't get anything out and everything is stayed inside. So stay tuned, because what we're really going to be talking about is the brain. Your brain is in control of everything. Just like we talked about the nervous system, your brain runs that nervous system. It is your nervous system. It's your central nervous system. Your brain and spinal cord are responsible for all of this. When we talk about the gut-brain connection, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, it's the brain that connects to the gut, and it relies from feedback from the gut to say what's going on. And as you know, 70% of your immune system is in your gut. So let's make sure we pay really close attention to that as we talk throughout this entire webinar. Well, here's a quote that we use in our office all the time from Dr. Bruce Lipton. And it says that the function of the nervous system is to perceive the environment and coordinate the behavior of all other cells. Yes, your brain and spinal cord have to control every cell, tissue, and organ inside of your body. But often what we see is that we don't like the behavior. We don't like the sick cells, right? We don't like how our child's behaving emotionally. And maybe their coordination is a little bit off. Maybe our child's a little bit awkward. And they have a hard spatial awareness of where their hands and their feet are, and they might be falling all the time, or they may have awkward gait. They might be really unorganized as far as fine motor skills go. And the perception is also off. So how they are perceiving their environment may be very different than you and I, where they might be stressed in a situation that we think is perfectly normal. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk about how the nervous system gets stuck and some of this perception, coordination, behavior is off. And we like to give the output the bad rap, but we got to look at the input and why it's there in the first place. And your nervous system has got those two modes of operation. As I mentioned, that fight or flight response is an inborn, innate response to stress. It is designed to be very short-lived, to turn on, turn off, and go balanced. So whatever threat comes your way, your sympathetic nervous system is triggered. Your brain dumps 1,200 chemicals into your body to change, and every single cell in your body experiences that stress. The heart rate raises. You've got blood that starts pumping from the internal organs out to the external limbs, so it can either fight or flee. You've got your senses that get turned up, 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 up. The volume control goes up, so you can literally look around and handle whatever threats there. We often see dilated pupils and ear and hearing issues, whether things are too loud or they're just like the child is very, very loud themselves because they can't even hear themselves. The senses are turned up. They might either have looking for extra sense, those sensory seekers, or the sensory avoiders, where they don't want to be touched and things hurt. They also have their tactile reflexes start increasing. And the thing is, we see this stuck on instead of turned on and turned off. Instead, we're living there. We're going to learn about the flip side of this, where the immune system lies and the parasympathetic nervous system lies, healing, repairing, digesting, which should be occurring while we're asleep, while our eyes are closed, which is why infants and babies require so much more rest than an adult does. But we still have to be able to heal and repair from the stress that we've put ourselves through during the day. So I say choose your stress wisely, my friends. And stress comes in three forms. It comes in physical, chemical, and emotional stress. We, as chiropractors, call them the 3 T's because we're kind of nerds, but thoughts, traumas, and toxins. And if you've been in my practice, you know these 3 things. You say, choose your stress wisely. But the more early they come and the more often you see these, the more interference, the more irritation, the more inflammation we start to see inside their bodies, and the stress gets literally stuck there. So the big red circle in the middle that says subluxation, that's what chiropractors call stress that's stuck on. That's what we're looking for. That's what we're looking for in the spinal cord between the brain and the body to say, is there some disturbance? Is there some interference? Is there stress that's stuck there and not properly processed? And are we feeding it through physical, chemical, and emotional stress? Because here's what we have known for a very long time is that we, as mothers, give our nervous system to our babies. So if we are feeling stressed, if we aren't healing and repairing for the day, if we've been worried during the entire pregnancy, or maybe something totally traumatic had happened during the birth, it was unexpected and you can't help, did that get passed on to the kid? We kind of bathe them in our blood, and whatever we're feeling, they're feeling. So instead of having really excited, relaxed pregnancies, when we go in, often we're given all sorts of tests and foods to avoid and stress tests to do, and just a laundry list of things that maybe we're doing wrong, and we're sitting there wondering and worrying, are we doing this right? Are we doing this right? Am I going to lose the baby? And instead of being calm, cool, and collected, which I wish I would have known this information when I had my 3 boys, because now I get the wrath of their nervous system as well. So don't blame yourself, moms, because I know we tend to do that. The physical stress during birth, we're going to take a look at that, of what can occur with a lot of intervention that starts happening these days, and the chemical stresses that are there in our lives, and the air that we breathe, the food that we eat, and the things we choose to put inside of our body, full of toxins, and all of these are stressful to our body. Our body cannot handle everything we're giving them today, from the overscheduling to the over-processed food, to the physical stress of technology. Unfortunately, we are sitting in classrooms and at computers for way too long, and the movement that our body needs and requires is more than what we're doing. We weren't designed to be a seated, sedentary culture. We're designed to move our bodies, and the more we get out of school or work and sit down in front of the TV or in front of a tablet and play the screen all day, the less movement our brain is getting, and that's what it requires. Nourishment is required to that brain. That brain, in order to do its job, has got to get proper water, air, food, and most importantly, neurological supply. And much of what it's fed from is the movement of muscles, electrical impulses. Every time you move your muscle, it sends an electrical impulse to your brain to feed it. We're going to find out how important the spinal cord is, and the nerves around the spine and the muscles around the spine are to feed the brain as well. So let's take a look at when there is too much stress, and something that we take a look at called the sympathetic overdrive. So first, this picture is showing us what's in control of the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. So these two sides of the coin, you can't be in growth and protection at the same time. Another Dr. Bruce Lipton quote. If you guys don't know who Dr. Bruce Lipton is, he is awesome, highly awarded. He did stem cell biology and stem cell research, where he had found that a lot of what we like to blame genes for is really epigenetic. So the environmental conditions that are turning on these genes. So we might have a gene, but to get those turned on, is the environment we put it in. And we've known long-term studies where they've done of twins where they put in totally separate environments, and you are a product of your environment. Those genetics are able to turn on or off depending on what you feed it. So it's highly, highly important. If you don't follow Dr. Bruce Lipton, I highly recommend it. He wrote The Biology of Belief, which is another amazing, amazing book. And The Honeymoon Effect, I really like that one. All about your brain and how you feed it good or bad thoughts. So when we were looking at what the parasympathetic nervous system does, and yes, the immune system lies in the parasympathetic nervous system, and what the sympathetic nervous system supplies, you can see how they're literally inversely proportional. You cannot have your stomach not digesting enzymes and digesting enzymes at the same time. It's going to be one or the other. So we often will take a look at somebody's body when they come in and see that they are stuck in a state of fight or flight, and they want to know where it came from. Well, those 3 T's, how does it get stuck there? Our body can't process it, and we start to lose our ability to adapt to stress. The most adaptable are who survive. And when you cannot heal or repair from the stress of the day, then you start to lose a battery charge. You start to lose your adaptability to stress. And that's what we measure on our gold standard HRV, that takes a look deep inside to see, is every one of your cells in a state of fight or flight? Is it emulating the fight or flight response? And by looking at the heart, it gives us a really good indication of how the rest of the body is doing. So we run a scan called the HRV, looking at the autonomic nervous system index and looking to see if we've lost that adaptability to heal and repair. And if our body is stuck in a state of fight or flight, and helping remove that. Because those of you that have been in my office before, you know that our adjustments stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system. It boosts the immune system. One of the very first research studies ever done was done in 1926 after they were trying to figure out why the people that were under chiropractic care during the flu pandemic of the 1918 to 1920 were surviving compared to people that were getting traditional medical attention, allopathic medicine. And what they found was that one upper cervical adjustment was raising the white blood cells by 10,000, which is just absolutely wild. And here's why. Here's the guy. You know the gut-brain connection. You know the vagus nerve. Vagus means wandering. This guy is the gut-brain connection. There's 9 times more fibers running through this vagus nerve than any other nerve back to the brain. It is one of 2 cranial nerves. There's 12, but 2 that actually leave the cranial vault, and it wanders throughout those organs. All that parasympathetic side, it was controlled by one nerve, the vagus nerve. And where does that thing exit? Right here in the upper cervical spine. So we said the white blood cell count is raised by 10,000 when you deliver one upper cervical adjustment. Yes, the vagus nerve becomes stimulated. What modern science has begun to figure out is that the vagus nerve, how important the vagus nerve is, and they've started to implant vagal nerve stimulators in people that cannot induce a parasympathetic response, and their gut is so shut off, and every other organ or gland from the vagus nerve is so shut down. They will actually cut in, put electrical electrodes in there, and they've got a little patch over here that they're able to use with a magnet, turn on and off to stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system response. And in our office, we know that our gentle, safe, and effective chiropractic adjustments to the upper cervical spine are going to stimulate that as well. And depending on the amount of stress that's put there, it's going to depend on how many adjustments somebody's going to need. That's what people ask us all the time, like, how many adjustments do they need? Is one adjustment going to do something? Is that all they need? Yes, one adjustment, of course, is going to do something, but it depends on the amount of stress that's there. And if you're looking to make a really good change in your child, depending on how much restoration and repair your body needs, that's how we determine how much care somebody needs. And then you get to go on well care. And that is the most beautiful part, because you've removed the stress from the body. You've let the body and the nervous system balance out. You've let every other organ system do its job, and then you get to live there. And that's the cool part, where you get to live there and experience an elevated quality of life. Because far too often we let our health decline. It's such a slow decline that we just have no idea how much life we've lost until you start to gain it back, and your eyes are opened and your body's energized, and you just cannot believe you spent your life subpar for so long. I've had the same experience with a workout where I thought I was in really good shape, and then all of a sudden I could get into better shape, and I even had even more energy, which is absolutely sometimes incredible. You just think you're healthy, and really there are things that we have no idea that we're limiting ourselves from. One of the things that we start to see neurologically, I'm going to start talking about some neurological terms, is dyskinesia. This is where this starts. This is where you're thinking like, why would that vagus nerve be restricted? What's going on? What happened? Something that we call dyskinesia, which dys means abnormal, kinesia means movement. It's not getting the movement. So why I said the brain is fed through movement, if you think about when your baby was developing, they're looking at motor skills, right, to determine the brain development. And if the motor skills are off, they know the brain is going to be off. And that's how they monitor their health. Our brain is still very mechanoreceptor driven. That means movement driven. And if it doesn't have the right movement, the brain's not going to develop the right way. The signals aren't going to get across the brain where they need to. Everybody knows Albert Einstein had the hugest corpus callosum. That means the thing that's was in the center of the brain. Well, what develops that is that cross pattern movement. And if it can't get up there, if the upper cervical is jammed up and the vagus nerve is jammed up and the signals can't get up there, then we know that the brain's not going to get what it needs, and the brain's going to be under stress, and it cannot have a neurological balance when it's under stress like that. So let's look at where something like this could have happened. And I know you can probably already see some of my slides, but I want you to watch this video. This is a non-emergency cesarean section. They're using a vacuum.
Come on, buddy. All right. Ears of a girl.
Whistle while you work. Whistle while you work.
Ears of a girl. Make you cute for the camera. Oh, yeah. There you go.
Okay. So if you haven't seen that video before, it's going to make you cringe. It still makes me cringe every single time that I see that video, because that was a non-emergency cesarean section. So I want you to think about that. We know that there's over 60 pounds of axial traction that's put on a head or neck during a process like that. It can be up to 90 to 120. They've started to make a new research study to get an instrument in there so they can help OBs deliver a baby vaginally and or through a cesarean section to know how much force they're putting on the head and the neck so they don't cause these injuries. Because we've known since the 80s that infants are born with an upper cervical injury. Dr. Gutmann had done a study in Germany of vaginal births, and he found 80% of them had neurological interference. They had dyskinesia. They had what he called KISS syndrome, and it meant suboccipital imbalance and strain. And they knew that this upper cervical spine was being strained during the birth process. And unfortunately, their conclusion was bring them to a pediatric chiropractor. Very few people got the memo. One of the things that we look at when a baby's born, we're like, watch the head, don't let the head drop. We're so gentle with them. But we don't know that this is what had happened moments before birth. And that's like any other injury in your body. Just think about your shoulder moving that far. How would that feel? Let alone a head or neck or right around the delicate spinal nerves and your spinal cord itself and that upper brainstem and the vagus nerve. What happens moments after birth? Typically, if it's a planned cesarean section, sometimes they're handed to the mom, but often the cord's cut and they're dried off and they're sucked out and mom doesn't see the baby yet. I know that's what happened to me. So I don't have a knock against cesarean sections. They are life-saving procedures. But what are you going to do after? I had a post-op protocol to do. I couldn't drive in the car. I wasn't supposed to walk. I wasn't supposed to lift a certain amount of weight because I was the one that was cut open, but I wasn't the one ripped around by my head and then left to wonder why my kid couldn't nurse or latch, why he was colicky, why he couldn't swallow all the way, why he was not breathing. He would stop breathing and turn blue, and it was absolutely terrifying. But when they're pulled out in their head or neck, so that last one was a vacuum. Here's a picture of one that is done by their hands, and you can see how the doctors have to grab a hold of their little occiput right near their brainstem, right near the vagus nerve, and tug and twist. Look at his poor little jaw. I mean, that's really traumatic. We would never allow anybody to handle our child moments after birth like this. However, they're entering life like this where they've never even touched gravity at all. And we measure this as well. We want to know how this stress has been affecting their organs and glands. How well is this brain able to communicate? How well is it able to receive nutrients? How well is it able to receive all of the information from the senses that we have? Probably not experiencing life very well, especially a picture that this little guy has. You don't have to be a doctor to look at this scan and say, oh, wow, obviously that child's experiencing a lot of stress. And this is after this child had a clean diet and essential oils and a toxin-free home and done OT and behavioral therapy, when they were just looking for a missing link on why he was still sick, why he was still struggling, why he couldn't sit through school and focus. We found a lot of neurological interference when what we call dysautonomia, when the autonomic nervous system is now off because it cannot pay attention to all of the organs and glands and all of that development that we're expecting it to do. And unfortunately, we start to lead down the path of symptoms and effects that we call from the subluxation itself. So here I have a picture over here of the brain and the spinal cord and the vagus nerve and where it exits, where you can get a really good picture of here is the back of a skull. We saw where that doctor was pulling on the head or neck, and believe me, this still happens during vaginal deliveries. The kid that got me down this path was born at home and just happened to come way too fast. That's also a stress. Stuck in the birth canal too long, and the jamming of the head is still a stress. And then here's that first cervical vertebra, that green one, flipped on end in a hole for the brainstem here, and right alongside that C1 is where that vagus nerve exits. So when we are in here assessing kids, we're often looking at how their body is oriented, and not only the way it moves, the way its eyes move, the way they're coordinated, if they have any balance. We want to know what their reflexes look like. We can often see in their position of their head, their little heads tilted off because they're compensating for that injury. When there's dyskinesia, when they've been misaligned and fixated, like we talked about, there's abnormal movement there. The body is now in protection. It's like any other sprain or strain where you've stretched the muscles, you stretch ligaments, you stress the brain, and it's saying, don't go anywhere. And here's what we know. We can always see our limbs, right? We can see in front of us. We can look down if we need to see our feet, even though we might not be coordinated. If you got one of those kids that are prone to accidents, you're definitely going to want to get them looked at as well. But we can always see these limbs. We always have that sort of joint awareness by looking, but what we can never ever see is our spine. We rely on what we call the eyes of the spine. There's muscle spindles, there's stretch receptors in there that anytime it moves, it gives feedback to the brain to say, oh, this is where I'm at. So when we're not moving, like I said, even in a seated posture at work or at school, the brain's not getting that feedback. But if it's blocked and fixated, if there's dyskinesia there, it's really not getting the feedback it needs. And the upper cervical spine is highly, highly important. If you look back at that last slide I had and I pulled it back up, there's a respiratory center up there, digestive center is up there, immune centers up there. That's got to do their job. And if they've started life subpar, that's not happening, and it starts to lead into some other issues. These are all neurological conditions that we start to see, neurological stress and dysfunction. There's disaffrontation. The signals now from the environment aren't coming in the way we want it to. That brainstem is like air traffic control. It's supposed to land the signals. It can't do its job. It's either going to be drunk or angry at the helm. And once we've got enough of that, the dysautonomia starts to set in where the body can't handle all the stress that's coming this way. The brain has been that energy suck, and we start to see immune, digestive, and endocrine dysfunction after that, because they're also huge energy systems in our body. And dysphonesis is some of that abnormal energy, emotional, behavioral, attention, focus, sleep issues that we see in our kids, where either they have too much energy, they don't stop moving, they don't stop thinking, they don't stop talking, they cannot focus, or you have too little energy where they just might be lethargic and unorganized and uncoordinated and they can't get through the day. Or they can be a combination of the two, and that one can sometimes be the absolute worst, where they are raging out of control but also super unorganized. So here's what I want to talk about, all of this leading to, and I just want to pull the immune system out of this dysautonomia. I want to pull the immune system out and look at it, because I told you that there's a balance. There's a balance in your nervous system, the fight or flight response, and the heal and repair response. There's like a gas and a brake pedal. In your immune system, there's also a balance that needs to be there. And there's two different systems in the body. There is your Th1 system, your innate response, and Th2, your adaptive response. And one cannot be on when the other one's on. They work together, but inversely proportional. And what we're finding, and I'm going to show you, is that we overstimulate the Th1 or the Th2 and understimulate the Th1. And unfortunately, that's when we start to see those kids that are just keeping everything inside. They're very toxic and they try to get it out on their skin. That's the eczema, that's the rashes, that's the dark rings under the eyes, that's the allergies and asthma, that's autoimmune conditions that are occurring, and they can't fight the common cold because the Th1 system is so weak. So when you look at the Th1 system, this is the first responders. This is like the firefighters. This is like, there's a fire, alert, alert, get out everybody you can, evacuate, burn it down, right? Burn it down. We know that that's a fever, that's heat. So there's vasodilation that occurs. There's inflammation, there's pus, there's mucus, rash, coughing, diarrhea, vomiting. It is literally the get it out system. We don't want that stuff stuck inside, and your body responds appropriately. So here's what I was talking about, that 70% of your immune system being in your gut, your skin, your GI tract, your throat, your eyes, your ears, every opening in your body is covered in this. And they're a very generic response to something bad's in, let's take care of it. And then they, in turn, alert the Th2 system, the very specific immune system. Here's some of the inflammatory response that we see. And what do we typically do, you guys? We typically shut this kind of stuff out. Here's the Th2 system. Here's the guy that comes in and says, all right, what happened here? What do I need to do to prevent this from happening next time, right? This is the long-term immunity. This is when they say you can't get sick with the same thing more than once. This immune system is designed to identify what got in, make a memory T cell, and handle it for next time. So here's the deal. It's going to kind of depend on how much stimulation was there. So if we got some big nasty virus that's in there and we had a big nasty Th1 response, we're going to make more of a Th2 response to that as well. But unfortunately, what we see is us shutting down the Th1 response. We give them fever reducers, we give them Tylenol, we give them antibiotics, we give them anti-inflammatories, anti-diarrhea, anti-vomiting, cough suppressants, antihistamine, antacids. We feed them sugar and crap. We're also extremely deficient on magnesium, which is highly important for this process, and foods high in omega-3s and 6s, which is part of the inflammatory response. And we shut down the Th1. We don't let it do its job. So instead, the Th2 system starts to increase, right? That's the system that's trying to make the specific immunity, but that's when we start to see some of the autoimmune conditions. That's when we start to see people that like literally keep everything inside, the ones that sound like they're constantly backed up in their nose, their ears can't drain, there's watery eyes, constipated, they are a little bit sluggish, they've got the eczema because the Th2 system is taken over, and allergies start to develop and autoimmune conditions start to develop. And like I said, you can't fight the common cold. This is what we need. We need to encourage the Th1 system. Like I said, chiropractic adjustments, there's gentle, safe, and specific and effective. If you've seen a pediatric chiropractor, you know that they know how to work on children and adults, mind you. I know I work a lot on kids, and we're talking about can't get the sick. This works for a whole family. We need less of the 3 T's, less sympathetic response and more parasympathetic response. We need more sleep. We need less food. We're not hungry when we're sick. That's because sugar feeds the bacteria. Our cells can live on our own fat and glycogen stores from the muscles, but the viruses and bacteria cannot. They've got to rely on sugar. So often we're just not hungry, right? It's a fasting response. Our body's trying to starve it, literally, and burn it. And we have to be able to do that. Our vaginal deliveries, if they did have a C-section or you were on antibiotics during the birth, unfortunately, they don't get that nice flush of vaginal flora to start the blood, the gut cascade that is vitally, vitally important for them to have healthy gut flora. Breastfeeding, also that response between mom and baby, they actually talk through the saliva, but the colostrum that's given is also highly effective and full of that Th1 system, of those antibodies that the body really truly needs to survive. If we cut the cord too soon, we didn't get all the blood supply into the baby. Now it loses about 50% of all the nutrients that it needed as well. So if your child, and once again, this is no judgment on how your baby came to this world, but to help understand where it may have came from and where the stress was there and where they might have started to experience life less than they could have when it started out. So eating fermented food is going to be helpful. Having a probiotics at night when you don't have food in your stomach, and it can repair the gut from the day. It doesn't have to compete with digesting the food, but really letting the body run its course and getting the rest that it needs instead of shutting down the Th1 system and not letting it do its job and watching it become weaker and weaker and weaker because it hasn't learned yet. And if it can't learn with the small stuff, it really is not going to learn with the big stuff. And that's when it gets super scary, when there's a huge, tremendous virus that comes in, or maybe even a superbug, because we live in such a sterile environment that starts to take over. And those are scary. Those are scary times. That's when we need antibiotics and medicine to be able to help us. But instead of reaching for the medicine cabinet, let's find a good way to boost their immune systems naturally. So Th2 system, I got this creepy kid on here, of course, but you see a lot of the bags under the eyes like that because they're internalizing everything. An overactive Th2 system is that just everything's constipated. They got the swollen adenoids, the swollen tonsils, chronic ear infections. They might have had tubes already, a constant runny nose, and allergies, eczema, and autoimmune conditions are starting to take in, and they cannot fight off the common cold or kick an ear infection. And we want to know, if our bodies are designed to self-heal, if they're designed to self-regulate, how do we give it the best chance? I say chiropractic exists to improve the human experience. And also, parents, you got to trust your gut. You got to know. But too often we are running for the Th1 shutoff system, so we don't have to see the symptoms. So we think they're gone, like we can just like an ostrich with our head, in the sand, and think, well, I don't have to experience it. Then she must not be experiencing it. She is. Instead, it's staying inside and it's manifesting into other things and overstimulating the Th2 response. We've got to help stimulate the Th1 and let it run its course the best you can. Trust your gut. 107.8 is brain damage. I saw somebody go to 107.1, one of my patients. It's the highest I've ever seen it get. And yeah, it's scary. I've had 105 on my kids, and that's why I threw away my thermometer and said, I don't want to watch it anymore because I know that their bodies can handle it. It just scares us. So instead, encouraging it, warming them up, letting it run its course, because it's going to stop during that inflammatory slide that I had before. It's going to produce enough heat to kill off enough of the virus and enough of the bacteria for it to take a breath. And you might have a fever that has to come back online because it doesn't want to damage its own cells. Our body is extremely smart and it's extremely intelligent. Do you know your kid's nervous system might be way off, right? And then if your nervous system is way off, if it's imbalanced, if there's too much sympathetic stress and it cannot do its job, then you know the immune system is going to be imbalanced because there's going to be that stress to the vagus nerve. There's going to be the stress to the dysautonomia because it started to take over our bodies and we're living our life less than we deserve. And man, this cold and flu season, it shouldn't be a big deal, but sure is. If you could empower your family instead to still get some activity, find an indoor activity to do with your kids after school. Make sure they're still getting out for recess. Make sure they're eating healthy food and drinking their water, and they aren't eating a bunch of crap during the holidays. You can find healthy alternatives and not feed it a bunch of sugar. Take a vacation, whether it's just a day away to help your body be able to process some of the stress. That's the best thing you can do, to let your body repair and heal. Let them sleep in if they need to on the weekends, but get them the rest that they need so they can heal and repair, and try not to run to the medicine cabinet. Instead, do things to boost the immune system naturally. Get them some omega-3s, get them some vitamin D, get them some vitamin C, and most importantly, get them adjusted. So what I want you to do is ask questions. You can ask questions as we're talking on this webinar. You can ask questions after, post it in the comments. I want to know if you've got a kid that's with an overstimulated Th2, understimulated Th1, but I also want you to know if your child's immune system's imbalanced because their nervous system's imbalanced and you haven't been able to get this right. Get your kid in and get a scan. I want you to click on the button below and get a VIP pass. Bring your kid in for that scan. We're going to sit down and look at the stress that's been in there. We're going to look at the 3 T's. We're going to look at their birth history and pregnancy history and say, here's where some of the things in this algorithm of development the stress may have started to take over, and here's some of the systems that are affected. But most importantly, during our neurological scans, we can pinpoint where the stress has come from, where it's at, measure it, and know exactly this is what it's going to take to remove the stress. And then you choose if you want your child to live there forever during well care. So I encourage you to do that. And I thank you so much for getting on this webinar. Thank you for following us on social media. Thank you for looking for natural drug-free alternatives for your kid and helping them have an elevated life experience.